What's up, everybody? We are back with another episode. We're in a little bit different environment. We're starting right out at the tank.
Yeah, we're like, let's mix it up. We're actually gonna hang out with the LX today on the topic of feeding coral. So figured might as well just start right out here. Yeah. We're back. We weren't here last week, but we're here to do some fun hands-on stuff.
We originally planned this last week, had to skip it. All good. We're going to feed some corals, you guys. This is always a really popular topic.
Yeah, we've done it a few times. Always popular. It's really good knowledge base too, especially people that have their first aquarium, especially a reef tank of like, what do I feed my corals? Am I supposed to? Am I doing it enough? So we're going to do that and actually feed all the corals here in the LX.
Awesome. Let's do it. Again, if you guys have questions, post them down in the comments. I will be reading them actively as Jess is feeding the corals, teaching you guys about that. I'll try to take as many of them as I can.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing today. We're just going to hang around the tank. Make sure to make friends in the comments. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. And
all right. We're going to get into it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, so a lot of people, we're going to put a filter on so you guys can see the beautiful colors of the coral. So when it comes to feeding coral, there are so many food choices out on the market that you're going to find. Gets a little bit confusing. What should I get? What corals eat what? How often? Why? So we're going to go through kind of the basics of that. And first off is there's about a million different opinions on how, what, why. This is what we base ours off of. And just going to kind of go over some of the key elements of feeding. And there's a lot more that are out there, but we're just going to talk through them real quick. So you've got liquid versions of food. So this is like a zooplankton. This is a phytoplankton, so meat versus veggies basically. You have powdered options that mix in water. You have pellets, and then you have frozen food like mysis and krill. Now, on an average day, you're not going to take 7 or 6, I can't count, 6 different foods and do them all at the same time, but just to show you guys, we're going to overfeed the tank a little bit, so don't go based off of how much we're feeding. So first thing I like to do whenever you're going to go and feed corals, especially if you're going to spot feed anything that's kind of meaty, like LPS corals, especially like scolies and meat corals, plate corals and stuff, you want to get their feeding response out. And a lot of times when your lights are on during the normal hours that you would feed, their feeding response is not there. And that means they're not going to grab the food and they're not really going to eat it. So I like to do basically like a teaser to them. And what you're going to take is one of your liquid foods. It could be the powder too. And this is just going to go in. I already shut the main pump down in here, but I left the power head on for right now. And so basically what I'm doing, putting in some liquid food. This is a zooplankton base. And this is going to feed other corals too. But this essentially is putting the smell of food into the water so that your corals that don't feed usually during daylight hours kind of get the signal and start to take a feeding response. So this is going to help you feed some of those ones that take a meatier food.
Again, if you guys have questions, post them down below. Anything Jess is talking about, and as we're going here, I'll try to answer them.
Yeah. So for your 2 different types of liquid food, like I said, we've got like a zooplankton base and a phytoplankton. Zooplankton's good for pretty much any coral that filter feeds. And this is the one you're going to use more commonly. Phytoplankton is algae based. Great food if you have a lot of soft corals and stuff, but your tank does also naturally produce phytoplankton, so it doesn't have to be something that you feed real heavy, but I do find it beneficial when you have a lot of soft corals or filter feeding type of things to add this in there just to kind of supplement what your tank is naturally making. And these are mostly used as a broadcast, which means you put it in and you let the flow of the aquarium take it to the corals. They filter feed out. You can of course take this food and put it directly on each coral to saturate feed them. Most soft corals are just going to filter feed. You don't have to spot feed very often, but if you want to kind of give a little special treat, go ahead and take that and you'll put it on that, and I'll show you guys doing that with the food in a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the power head off. You wanna alleviate as much flow as possible when you're spot feeding because it's gonna keep the food on there longer and have less chance of it kind of getting kicked off. First thing I'm gonna do in the LX here, because of our deer mango, who is a huge pig and will steal every bit of food that I put in here on a coral, she's gonna get a nice sheet of sea veggies.
That's really smart. I never thought about doing that.
To hopefully
Keep them
distract
away.
her
Yeah.
somewhat from stealing all the food. So if you've got hungry fish, feed them beforehand, put in something for them to graze on, just to help you to not have every single fish ripping all of your coral food off of your corals. So we're gonna let her hopefully munch down and stay away from what we're doing for the most part. We'll see how it works. If you've got shrimp and other fish, I mean, it sometimes is a bit of a battle to actually get them the food without everyone picking it off. You can make little covers for them. I'm pretty sure we actually have a video on YouTube somewhere of making one with like a 2-liter or juice bottle.
Yeah.
Where you can make a cover for the coral if you're spot feeding something really in particular. Like scolies and meat corals, they need a lot of food for them to do well. So you've got to be able to have them have that food on them and be able to eat. So as I was talking about, this is like your zooplankton liquid. If you want to take some of it and actually spot feed, so I'm just going to take it and just real gently let it fall onto the coral. Hi, shrimp. There you go. You're not going to do anything with it. And this just kind of saturate feeds them. Small polyp, like smallmouth LPS, this is pretty beneficial for. But like I said, it's not necessary. They generally will filter feed a lot of it out. And this is why you also want to have that flow off to let it kind of set on them and not blow away as much. If your shrimp will leave it alone. And this is another very popular food type. It's basically powdered, and then you mix it with your tank water. They come in zooplankton and plankton mix. And these are just nice because they're easy to store. You're just gonna mix it with your tank water and stir it up once it's all good and stirred. And these tend to be a little bit bigger particles than like the liquid version. That. Same thing, you can broadcast feed this, or if you want to target feed. Most soft corals I don't target feed, but things like really nice mushrooms or stuff, I will usually take some of this and give them a little bit extra, just because you want to increase their growth. They can also take small pieces of food.
Island Reef is asking, what foods do you recommend to not raise phosphates too much?
Any food is a waste product because it's being consumed and makes waste. So I think as long as you're using them and not overdoing it and have proper filtration, I don't think that there's one that's going to be cleaner than another necessarily. It's really about balance of waste product in your aquarium. That's why always having good skimmer, good filtration, you know, routine maintenance is beneficial. So if the shrimp will get off, a lot of that's actually just sitting onto the mushroom for that. Shrimp are probably your worst enemy in spot feeding. If you have cleaner shrimp, they do not joke around.
We have a number of those in there, don't
Yeah,
we?
there's
2 or 3.
2 or 3 in there, and they don't care.
Keenan, I think you lost your remote connection. Guys, we might have lost our video there. We will be back in just a second. We lost a battery, so just bear with us.
Anyone have any questions on there we can go through? Or
Yeah. So as we switch this battery out, Adriana says it's a debate. Do Ghanies eat?
Ghanies really need food. I think one of the #1 things for survival for Ghanies long term is enough food source and also spot feeding. And if you're not into spot feeding, I told them, if you're gonna have gonnies, is put them somewhere in like a direct line of where your flow would go if you put in broadcast food or a liquid or a powdered food so that it hits them. Aquacultured ones, of course, are way better as far as like handling not as intense feeding. But if you ever get a wild gonny, you have a ton of food that's needed. You still have video problem?
Is it better to feed at, no, we're back.
Okay.
Is it better to feed at night with the lights off, or does it really matter?
Okay, so that's why I put in the food to kind of like tease them out into feeding mode. Is a lot of corals are not in feeding mode, especially LPS, when lights are on. That's just a natural instinct. So if you want to be up in there when it's dark with a flashlight and spot feeding, have at it. Most people do not. So if you put that either liquid or powder, some kind of food in before spot feeding, it becomes like a trigger response. So when you put it, every time you'll notice they open up faster, they get into feeding mode faster. And over time, you actually notice that during the day, they might actually stay open for feeding without adding that food in first. So it's basically training them to eat well with the lights on, which I think for most people is gonna work better with their schedule. You know, most people aren't gonna be as committed to just go ahead and do that when lights are off at nighttime and spot feeding. So if you can get them to do it during the day, it's gonna be a lot better. Okay, another one I have here, which can work good for LPS, I'm actually gonna move to this side, and mushrooms. Pellets. Nice thing about pellets is they sink down right onto the coral, not free floating. So these are really good for target feeding. Mushrooms are really good for pallies if you want to, but my favorite is a lot of times like frog spawns and hammers. All the euphyllia corals do really well with these because it goes right into their tentacles and it's a lot easier for them to grab and keep hold of. I'm just taking some pellets and you just gently let them fall in. Hi, Mango. And they're gonna catch it. So pellets do come in handy too. I think they're really good actual target feeding. Just get ones that are more meat-based, just because corals are going to be wanting more meaty type food. So it also works for mushrooms because it can fall right into kind of like the middle where their mouth is. And if you got that flow off, they settle in really nicely as long as no one comes and steals everything. And pellets are usually small enough for the mouths of things like mushrooms or palithoas to go ahead and take them up. So you'll see it in a little bit, those mushrooms will start to kind of close up and around the pellets and actually take them in. So we're just gonna go ahead and sprinkle some more over here. We have a nice little euphyllia garden until they just kind of fall right into the coral, making it a really nice, easy target feeding. And of course, have the proper cleanup crew for the ones that do not land on the coral. I said, generally we're not gonna do, 5 different types of food and target feed everybody at the same time. So just keep that in mind for whenever you're actually feeding. So if you watch those mushrooms, they're gonna start to cup up a little bit.
I want to touch on this. One of the viewers said they ordered a Marine X 110.4 in Aspen, but it was out of stock and got to wait. So, unfortunately, you ordered one of the most popular models.
Absolutely.
So we do have an extremely high demand right now. So we're working to ramp up production. And just so you guys know, these tanks aren't necessarily they're not coming off of like some automated production line, right?
Yeah.
So we do have technicians that hand glue all these tanks, so it does take a little bit of time, and our demand a lot of the time exceeds what we're putting out, but we are ramping up production significantly. So here in the coming weeks and months, you should be seeing a lot more readily available tanks.
Yeah, catching up to the demand.
Yeah.
Especially with a new color like Aspen, because we knew we loved Aspen, and that's why we chose it.
Yeah.
But knowing how popular it's going to be on certain models, It exceeded
we
what we thought.
We couldn't have predicted that so many people would love that aspen color. It has absolutely blown our minds.
Yep. Aspen is beautiful, so it's worth the wait. I know patience is tough. Patience is really, really tough. I'm horrible about it. So anyone who is waiting, I know it's tough. Next one, so we've gone through like the powder foods, the liquid, all the smaller filter feeding or pellets. So we're gonna move on to like bigger chunks of food. This is key for a lot of LPS to grow, to multiply. Like people that have frog spawns and hammers and Duncans are like, it's never grown, it hasn't really grown. It needs more food. And the fleshier a coral is, the more food it needs, as a general rule. So when you look at corals like the frog spawns, and you've got like lobos and meat corals and like bubbles, in order for them to continue to grow, there's a lot of food. And catching it and filter feeding it off of fish waste and a little bit of like zooplankton is not gonna cut it for them. So this is really gonna speed up your growth and make a healthier coral. So little kind of like types of mysis. Another great choice for frog spawns. Lobos, acans, blastos are all ones that'll benefit from a little bit chunkier food, but not huge. So we're gonna use our little Euphilia garden over here. So this is just giving them the energy they need to grow, because there's just not enough energy naturally just floating around your aquarium. We keep our closed environments very clean. It's not the ocean that, you know, is huge and has natural food coming through the waves and stuff like that. So we do have to keep into effect that these corals need the extra feeding. Your soft corals, probably with no extra feeding or anything, will grow just fine in your aquarium, but you're gonna need it for your LPS to really see that growth. And with these guys, they have, get away. There you go, have some. Their tentacles have a nice stickiness to it, so the food sticks well, and then they travel it down to their mouth, with this buried in, and you know, down in each head here is actually their mouth to take that in and digest it. Our fish are actually being pretty good about stealing food today. So acans, also, I mean, you can use mysis for blastos, large mushrooms, that kind of stuff, Duncans. Anything that has a decent amount of fleshiness and a mouth to it will take well to a smaller meaty food like mysis shrimp.
I got a question. If the mouth of the coral is open, does that mean to feed?
If it's not always staying open, yes. If it's kind of like even open, it's sensing food. So a lot of times when you put that like teaser food in the liquid already, you'll notice the mouth start to open more, and that means that they've got that feeding response ready. Now, if your coral's mouth is always open, that's usually a sign of sickness. So yeah. Depends on in what fashion the mouth of the coral is open. All right. One of the last food types is like large meaty food. For this one, we're using some krill. You can use krill, depending on how big your corals are, like chunks of silverside, chunks of other types of shrimp. Things like our bubble coral here, especially large ones, meat corals. If you've ever seen like a cinerina or a meat coral, you know, this thing's like this big around, and you're like, oh, I'll just feed it a little bit. I've seen, I mean, they'll take down a silverside this big, and they just like dome up around it and eat it. So they definitely need that meatier food. Anemones too are really big on eating big chunks of meaty food. So we're gonna feed a little bubble. He's actually quite closed down in comparison. He usually fills out this whole area right here. But definitely can see, if you can get in close, you'll see these like almost clear, like longer tentacles kind of sticking out from the bubbles. That's actually the feeding tentacles. So we have the feeding response going from him.
I have to read this. Cole says that he bonds with his corals by jamming his head into the tank and feeding them from his mouth.
Does he feed corned beef and cabbage? That's my question.
Yes, feeds them. It's a bonding experience with the corals.
That's very, very bonding.
You get a silverside, you know, put it in your mouth.
That's so gross. That's so gross.
No way.
All right, I gotta get this way.
Okay.
Phew, come switch sides. I'm left-handed. I can't do it otherwise. All right, so this guy is big old bubble coral. We have had this bubble coral for
4 years, probably.
4 or 5 years now. Came in as like a small colony and has grown so big. So here, I'm just gonna spread it around. We should see him kind of wrap around them. Looks really cool whenever he's feeding. Pretty quickly. Mango. I'm gonna let it kind of fall on him. So on something this size, it's got mouths everywhere. Even though it is one coral, it does have numerous feeding spots on something this large. So you kind of just spread them all around.
The cool thing about this bubble coral is over time it developed these like neon green tips.
Yeah, not gonna lie, this thing was kind of like an ugly brownish bubble coral when we first got it. But it has those highlight colors on it. Actually came out whenever we moved them under radions, because at first it was under hydras.
Yeah.
For the first probably 2 years, and then it got moved to radions, and that's when this green like accent color came through. And it's made it super unique looking, because before that was actually just like a brownish slight green color.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows that lighting does matter.
Do corals poop?
Yes, they do. Gross fact, they eat and poop out of the same mouth.
Nice.
Just so you know.
Nice.
That one's for all y'all.
Feed bubble tip and enemies silver sides or no?
Depends how big it is. If it is a large bubble tip, absolutely. You'll find if you feed it something too big, it will take it in, but then you're gonna find later that it kind of like brings it back out partially digested.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a lot of waste and stressful on an enemy. So depending on how big it is, you know, base your food and how it responds to like digesting it and keeping it down.
Mike says, today I learned corals eat shrimp.
Yeah, somewhat cannibalistic, you know, and the whole thing.
A little wild.
Yeah.
How many slices of pizza should I feed in a 220 frag?
So if you look here, behind the big open, you'll see 2 completely closed mushrooms. They just look like little brown blobs. So they have completely closed up around their pellets and are digesting them. So it's pretty cool. You'll see this big flat mushroom can actually turn into like this closed little ball as it eats. And then once it's done, it'll open back up and look like a normal mushroom again. And this one's starting to show like the folds inside as it takes the food down. So a lot of people are probably going to say, how often do you feed? How do I know if I'm feeding too much? I would say like broadcast feeding you can do of putting in like zooplankton or like phytoplankton, you know, a couple times a week, because everything filter feeds. Actual spot feeding, it's going to come down to how much waste you can put in your tank and keep your parameters good. You could technically feed your corals like every day or 2 if they're ready to eat, but you're going to have that much more waste. So, you know, I would say most people like once a week going in spot feeding is probably about average, but it really depends on what your aquarium can handle. Of course, the more food, the better water quality, the better growth.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of find the balance between those things. If you've got a tank mostly full of soft corals, you can pretty much just broadcast feed all the time and they're cool. If you've got those meaty or LPS corals, you definitely want to get in there and spot feed on occasion. I'd say once a week if you can, because it's just going to improve their growth. They're fluffier, they're just happier, they have better color when they're fed regularly.
Are you done with the food?
That's all the food, yeah.
Okay.
Gonna
I'm
wait
gonna
to
go
see
ahead and
them.
put it on the tripod so you can answer questions. Anything else coming in?
I think we're good on questions. If you guys have any more questions, post them below. If you guys liked this format, we haven't actively been like working on a tank in a bit.
I know. That's what the feedback we got last time when we asked was like more hands-on or builds or stuff on the tank. So we're like, we're gonna feed corals and we're gonna stay by the tank the whole time. Instead of doing like a little written Q&A, we'll just do it kind of out here.
So it looks like the lights are they starting to dim now? Or
Yes.
is this the same? Yeah.
They are going a little bit more blue, yeah.
Yeah, so we do have a filter. Some people are mentioning we need a filter. We do have a filter on the camera. It's just I think the lights have gone all actinic at this point.
Yeah, it's
And it's not our normal orange filter, it's more of a yellowish filter, so it's making everything a little bit greener, but it's still better than the blue.
yeah.
Our orange filter has a big scratch on it.
Yeah. There you go, guys. The orange, our nice orange filter has a big scratch. So
All right, we'll have to get a new
We're
one,
making good.
I guess. Put that on the list. But yeah, the lights are ramping down for the day. And the fish are like, well, it's actually past their bedtime anyway, because I had to extend the lights
Yeah.
because they usually go off before then.
if you guys are wondering too, this is the 6-foot Reef LX.
Yeah.
It's been set up here for a little while. I don't think we did a build on it though, did we?
This one, no, because we just combined some stuff into it. So I think we did a couple shows just kind of showing the updates on it. But we didn't do like an all-out build on this one. We hope to have some new builds coming up pretty soon.
You guys want to close it out?
Yeah?
Yeah.
There's no more questions?
I think there's enough over here.
Yeah, guys. So we appreciate you all being here. We hope you like this format. We'll probably be back in what, like another, not next week, but the following.
I'm not sure.
No, we won't be back.
It wouldn't be the following.
Yeah,
So maybe next
we'll be
week.
back in 2 weeks.
2? No. No, it wouldn't be 2.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back at some point. Keenan's in the other room, in the production room, trying to figure out when we're going to cut this thing.
We don't know when. We'll be back at some point. We don't have a set schedule right now. But yeah, just stay tuned. As long as you
Yeah,
hit
just
your
make sure you guys subscribe to the
notifications and
channel. Hit
subscribe,
those
you'll know when we're
notifications.
coming back
And
next.
also, if you guys aren't, subscribe to our email list and our SMS, our text messages, so you can get notified right when we're going live. But again, we appreciate you all being here.
Yeah. I guess.
And we will see you in
See
a
you guys
few
next
weeks.
time. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you all for watching. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. And also remember, you can visit us online at waterboxaquariums.com.
Also join our official Facebook group. Thanks for watching live. See you next week.